So I've got another question for you. And this comes from a 38 Degrees member in Rotherham. So 2 years ago, as you mentioned, we voted to leave the EU in a referendum. Are we bound to follow this? And is it possible to have a second referendum?
No and yes are the two short answers. So under the UK Constitution, and we do have a constitution, we just don't have it written down in one place. Parliament is sovereign, so Parliament makes decisions and it is the final deciding body in the British political system. So a referendum can only ever be advisory. But in the age of modern politics, groups like yourself, if there's a referendum and millions of people, tens of millions of people have voted, as they did, the decision is effectively binding on Parliament, which is why Parliament really had to follow through on the decision back in June 2016. However, the referendum itself and Parliament's acceptance of that doesn't automatically mean the UK leaves the EU. What made that happen was that on the 29th of March 2017, Theresa May wrote a letter to Donald Tusk, the President of the European Council, to say the UK wants to leave. And so under the terms of the EU's treaties, this Article 50 that everyone knows, and maybe not everyone's read, but the first part of it is you notify the EU wants to leave, and that starts a clock ticking, which says 2 years from the date of notification, that member state ceases to be a member state.
Okay.
And so the default in this is that the UK leaves without a deal. But we have 2 years in which to try and sort out details and arrangements, which was there because it was recognised it was going to be quite hard to disentangle a country from the EU. And also, really importantly, it was to show that the EU couldn't stop a member state that wanted to leave. There would not be a decision taken lightly. So once you've made that notification, you're on your way out. And that's a really important part of this, is that the default process, the default outcome is leaving without a deal. So it's not like a normal negotiation. You know, you want to sell me your car, we haggle about it. In the end, I say no. It's not that you still have to give your car to me at the end. It's that you still have your car, I still haven't got a car, and we're back where we were, before we started the discussion. Here, the key decision has already been made, which is that notification. So, with all that in mind, we are going to leave unless something is decided otherwise, and that's where a second referendum comes in. That probably, given the politics of the UK right now, the only roughly acceptable way for most people to stop leaving would be to have a second vote, because one referendum cancels out another, I think, is the kind of logic. There are lots of problems with that logic, but we can talk about that further on. What's much less clear is, will we get that second referendum? At the moment, I think you have to say that the chances of that are really small. This Prime Minister, I can't ever see accepting a second vote. I can't actually see any Conservative government in the current scheme of things accepting that as well, because it goes totally against what they've campaigned and fought for and negotiated about. Theresa May habitually is not a person to share in the decision making. You know, she really fought Parliament having a role in this. So why is she going to go and give the key decision back to everyone? And also, just simply practically, the last two times we've gone to the polls, 2016, 2017, actually 2015 as well, people didn't vote the way that everyone thought they did. And a fairly golden rule of referendums is you only ask the question if you're very sure about what the answer is going to be. And nobody's going to be sure. And it's actually quite uncertain kind of route. So for people who want a second referendum as a way to stopping the process, it's both unlikely that that will happen, and if it does happen, it's not a shoe-in that it actually would be the outcome that they get. So probably to get to a second referendum, you've got to have a general election first. Okay. So who knows, maybe in the next 45 minutes we'll have breaking news. But no, I think that's not where we are at the moment. So that doesn't look like a real option at this stage. It's not to say that there aren't good arguments for having approval. The referendum in 2016 was just remaining or leaving. It didn't say anything about what either of those things looked like definitively. So now we have a text. There might be an argument for that. But again, the text that has come out this week is about ending membership. It's not about the future relationship. So there's all of this horrible and complicated and everything as it has been is nothing as compared as what would happen if it's signed and then we start negotiations on the future relationship from next year, once we're no longer a member state. Because there's even less agreement in the EU and the UK about what that future relationship looks like. Those negotiations will talk about where we are heading towards. And then I think there's an even stronger argument for having a discussion and potentially a referendum about it. But again, that will come down very much to what a government looks like at that point, who's in charge, and what are the pathways to that.
That's really, really helpful. Thank you so much.